The first attribute is clarity and purpose. We must ensure that we empower the public to understand complex civic issues so that they can be enabled to participate in the process of decision making. We must also use public writing as a voice for good, not for bad, a voice for the good, a voice for justice, and allow people to be engaged in the process, like what we're having today, a civic discourse, not a civil discourse, a civic discourse, where we mobilize people towards collective action. Mike spoke at length about evidence-based reasoning. I don't want to challenge him on that, I'd like to compliment him on that. Evidence-based is based on understanding others and their differences. If you understand differences, you can understand who you are. And that is why I like differences, because it makes me understand myself even better. So evidence-based reasoning simply means building trust, credibility, and responsibility. So for example, if you have a family, in my case, a family of 7 children, 3 of whom are not my biological children, but as far as I'm concerned, they're my children anyway. I have to understand their differences and know how to navigate as a father, a husband, a grandfather, a great-grandfather. So you could imagine how many forms of navigation I'm doing. The point is to understand how to reason with them. And then there's ethical responsibility. The word ethics sometimes presupposes behavior, attitudes, but ethics simply means fairness. Fairness. Give someone the benefit of the doubt, even if you may not appreciate his or her opinion, because everybody's opinion is just as important as the other. None is superior or inferior than the other, because each has a role to play within discourse. And the final bit on civic duty in terms of attribute is structured argumentation. What do we mean by structured argumentation? You can argue and debate and you can dispute, but you do it in a structured, reasonable way, in a way that is civil and civilized and respectful. And so it is important that we do that. I want to talk about the challenges and ethical dilemmas that we have in writing and journalism. And I'm very much driven by evidence. 47% of journalists, and I want you to note this because this is coming from 40 years of research. 40 years. 47% of journalists report editorial interference by owners as well as advertisers. Could you imagine an advertising agency telling you what to write? Challenging the orthodoxy of fairness and transparency? It beggars belief, does it? But that's the state we're in, according to Will Hutton. Mike will know who Will Hutton is, actually. 68% of media leaders cite AI content as a top ethical concern. 68%, that's nearly 3/4 of people who are involved in the media. 59% of global audiences express low confidence in news accuracy. So when you write, people are questioning your veracity, your ability and capacity to write or to interpret news as it is. That's 59%. That's quite a lot. 74% of publishers, that's where I'm coming now, 74% of publishers worry about declining traffic from search and social media. When I'm talking to students, they're busy Googling me to find out if it's me. But sir, how do you know that? I said, I'm an old guy. Come on, I'm a senior, I'm an elder. but you don't look like that. You look like a boy. I said, so what? You know? So we're constantly having to prove who we are as a people. You know, the so-called quest for identity. Who is he? Who is she? 42% of journalists globally report experiencing censorship or surveillance. When I was a practicing journalist, contrary to what Professor Fred said, I was never censored. I was never wiretapped. You know why? Because I was working for the government and I was working for the opposition. Okay? So my dad taught me to have a delicate balance between the good, the bad, the ugly, and the indifferent. 61% of newsroom editors cite pressure to publish quickly as a major ethical risk. We were talking about the commercial imperative, the lure of the pound. Paisa, Dusty, dinero. Everybody wants a quick buck, but nobody wants to bear the responsibility of the burden of proof. I have gone through the realm of newspaper publishing, book publishing, and consultancy, and those are not easy roads to travel. And finally, a call to action. This is Fred's favorite word. When I first met him over 30 years ago, he used to say, a call to action. He was a younger man then, but he was still wise. Always a humble figure. So I'm going to use his euphemism, call to action. So what are some of the common good call to actions that we need to look at in terms of journalism and professional writing? The first call to action would be fact-based reporting, sometimes referred to as reportage, which is the French for reporting. Fact-based, facts. One of the facts that we have today, you are here. You are real people. You're not humanoids, right? You're not bionics. You are real people, real people. So fact-based reporting is designed to enhance public trust, and more importantly, it counters misinformation. Misinformation, disinformation. And that is the importance of fact-based reporting. Inclusive storytelling. When we do heritage projects, for example, I write so many different heritage projects, we're always told to write a story. When you write an application for funding, there's a story involved. And that story involves many individuals, participants, donors, stakeholders, funders, and Joe and Jenny public. So storytelling amplifies marginalized voices and promotes social equity. Civic forced writing, civic forced. How do we encourage civic people to write? Well, first of all, we understand their cultures, their ideas. The clients that I deal with are Africans, Indians, Chinese, English, Scottish, Welsh. I have so many clients from different backgrounds. And as a consultant, I have to understand what is it they're trying to present in terms of helping. Ethical transparency. Again, two overloaded terms. Ethics are about behavior, attitude, value systems, how we present ourselves formally and informally are all important. Transparency, speaking the truth, cost it what it will. Speak the truth. It is better to die speaking the truth than to die lying your way to the grave, as we say. Media literacy, very important. Does social media encourage literacy? Does it or does it not? But media literacy advocacy empowers audiences to critically evaluate information and resist the temptation of manipulation. Social media on its own serves a purpose, It can be for personal amusement, but it can also decry or counter what we see as objectivity and fairness. And finally, another important call to action in terms of journalism and professional writing is using the media as a watchdog. In other words, to observe, speaking truth to power, and exposing corrupt practices and injustices. And you notice I didn't say corrupt regimes, because corruption is a state of mind. No one is born corrupt. No one is born to hate. No one is born to fear. It all begins in the mind and the environment. Mr. Chairman, my fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen, special invitees and guests, it's indeed a privilege and great honor to be here this afternoon on the occasion of the inaugural, I would call it celebration, of the Common Good Consortium. Thank you very much indeed, and may God be with you.